So hello, hopefully you're all doing well. I really do mean that sincerely. Hope that all of you are doing well in this, I guess, what was the word we're going to use, unprecedented time. But I really do sincerely from my heart hope that you're all doing well, given the circumstances. If we ever, but in hopes of continuing some amount of normality in your life, let's continue what we've been doing. So let's learn something new, right? And I really do hope that if you're not, well, let's say that you're using this time wisely, that you're learning, that you're applying yourself, that you're developing yourself into the person who you'll become in the future, right? You're all in a crucial point of your lives as teenagers, becoming young adults. Most of you are even young adults at this point. Most of you, I don't know why I'm saying that. A lot of you are young adults at this point. But hopefully you're developing yourself to become a strong individual, right? So, that out of the way, we're going to start with, of course, the PowerPoint. So this PowerPoint I sent you guys had a quiz at the beginning over quantum mechanics. So we're going to go over that because, yes, it's a quiz. Oh boy. So there are 5 questions. We're going to go over 4 of the questions because that 5th question is too easy. It's very similar to 4, actually. If you get 4, you'll get 5. So start. I'm going to be projecting all these up here so you don't see my horrible visage, the entire PowerPoint. But starting off, you got number 1. Question number 1 says, briefly explain what is meant by wave-particle duality. So you stop, you think, you'd be like, that sounds like, yeah, Faraday said something about that in one of the other videos, right? In fact, I pretty much put down exactly what I said in that video, but light is neither a wave nor a particle, right? It's both. It has properties of both at the same exact time. And it acts like either depending on the barrier it encounters. When you split, we showed the laser split, right? In fact, I'm going to put a picture back up here. When you split a laser into all those different beams, that splitting, right, is light acting like a wave, kind of, right? Because it's hitting all those areas. But if you slow that light down to just one photon, right, one particle of light. By the way, when I say particle, light isn't matter. It's energy. So particle might not even be the best way of describing it, but the one little particle of light, right? If you slow it down to just one little thing of light, that light will hit somewhere where that light is showing, right? Where that light scatter, all those spots it could be, it'll hit in one of those light areas, but only one. The pattern won't be there. It'll just be a single light hitting in one of those areas. If you continue to let particle by particle of light go through, because we've done this in labs, you'll see it create that pattern, but each particle hits only one of those spots. So the particles are creating the wave pattern as though there's a wave right behind it. But it's weird. That's what I mean by wave particle duality. The light acts like both of those. It's a little bit more complicated. There's a lot more complicated math behind it, but for high school, that's all you need to know. It's also a little bit more nuanced to it, especially with quantum computing and things. Like I said, quantum computing actually has this embodied some degree. Anyways, moving on. It's number 1, that's how you'd answer it. Number 2, you got, of course, everyone's favorite thing. A one-dimensional particle in a box. That equation, right? That giant equation that's, right there. First off, I want to explain a little bit behind this equation, because you might be like, what? Why would we care about energy? Why would you use energy to define where a particle? Well, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, why we use energy, right? You don't know where a particle. You don't know exactly where it is. You can think of it kind of like an electron, right? You don't know exactly where an electron is as it orbits an atom. You know it's orbiting the atom, but you don't know if it's there, there. Technically and honestly, it's 3-dimensional, right? So when we do circles, what we really mean is like spheres, right? So it could be anywhere in that sphere. You don't know exactly where the particle is. But you do know what energy level the particle is, which you should know from chemistry or physical science or physics. But particles are bound by energy levels, right? That's why that's why energy in quantum is way better at describing where a particle is than, position. You don't, with Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, right? In real life, you don't actually know where a particle is. You know that it could be located in this circle, right, or sphere, 3D, but circle, but you don't know where in the circle. But you do know by energy that it's in the first ring of an atom, or second ring, or third. And when you say like for this problem, right, principal energy level N2, the second energy level of an atom, so the second ring of an atom. Now it might be hydrogen. Hydrogen, electrons on the first level normally. But if you put electricity in hydrogen, or if you shoot lasers at hydrogen and you give it energy, right, that electron will jump to the second energy level. That's where this equation comes from. That's why it's important. It's actually really important to chemistry. It shows up a lot in chemistry. If you ever major in chemistry, it might be important to you. You might have some kind of chemical reaction that only happens when you forcefully make electrons jump. So that might be a catalyst for some of the reactions. Anyways, going back to this. So that was fun. So you can use that equation. You have h bar. H bar is new for a lot of people, right? H bar. That H with a line above it. The h bar. That's what we call it. Is equal to h divided by 2 pi. You know what 2 is. You know what pi is. H is Planck's constant, which I hope is on your master equation sheet. But it's 6.63 times 10 to the negative 34 joule seconds. That's h bar. That's how you calculate it. So you're going to take that value, you're going to plug it into this equation, you're going to plug in all these values into that equation, and when you plug all those numbers into that equation, you get that number at the bottom. Yeah, so that's basically how you solve that. And that tells you how much energy you need to move electrons, energy levels, or how much energy is used to confound an electron in energy. Oh, things like that. It's useful. Number 3, you have an electron. It's trapped in a box. Of course it's a box. Now when we say box, and we mean like it's trapped in a length type deal. We don't actually mean box, because you guys aren't able to do one-dimensional quantum mechanics, only 1D quantum mechanics without like high amounts of calculus. By high amounts of calculus, I mean like tensors and nasty things like that. But so that's fine. We're just going to do one-dimensional, algebra equations, because that's easy to deal with. It still gives you the concepts, and still gives you practice for some truth of reality, but not all of it, right? Which is fun. So an electron's trapped in a box. The box is, 2 nanometers. By that we mean that you know that the electron is in a 2 nanometer, like line, circle type deal. You don't know where it is in there, but you know it's somewhere in there. So then you must ask, what is the momentum it could have? What are the momentum values it could have? Del P, when I say change in momentum, I really meant uncertainty in momentum. What momentum could it have? It's going to be greater than or less than some value. It has to have a bigger momentum or equal to momentum than some value. You don't know what, it's going to be some range. So when you use the Heisenberg-Stichler principle, you just plug in triangle X, you plug in, again, Planck's constant, H, you plug in 4, you plug in pi, split it out, you get that number right there. Something crazy small. So that's not too bad. Which kind of makes sense, because electrons are like 10 to the negative 31 kilograms in mass. Maybe. You probably don't know that, but that value kind of makes some sense. And number 4. Bring us to number 4. So for number 4, you have to calculate the energy of a photon of the following types. So energy, right? Maybe thinking like energy. I've seen that before. We'll use a one-dimensional energy equation. No, you're not going to use a one-dimensional box energy equation. I'm not going to use the equation from problem 2. No. We're going to use the equation you have associated with photons, which I think is called de Broglie's wavelength equation or energy equation. Yeah, that equation right there. E is equal to hc divided by lambda. You use that equation. And you use that equation in part A, you solve it, you plug in numbers, it's pretty easy, right? You get a number. For part B, though, there's one trick. You have to use something, because you're given hertz. You're given frequency, right? You're not given wavelength. You can't use an equation of wavelength if you don't have wavelength. So you might be like, well, what equation do I know that? Oh, of course, right? Wave speed is equal to wavelength times frequency. Equation you learn in physical science, or at least I teach it, it's standard, but you're supposed to learn in physical science. Wave speed, you guys should know, since this is photon, light is light speed, right? C, 3 times 10 to the 8th. So you plug in those numbers, solve for wavelength, then you use that wavelength value to solve for energy. That's how you do it for. It's pretty easy. That's the exact same equation as whenever c is equal to wave times frequency. That equation, it's the exact equation you use for number 5. You're just converting. That's why 5's easier than all these questions technically, is you actually didn't need to know quantum mechanics. But there you go. There's your quantum mechanics quiz done. Now we're moving on to the better part of the PowerPoint, and probably video number 2.